Hello, my name is Louise Spangler, and I am presenting my research proposal for EDUC751 Quantitative and Qualitative Research Design at Carson-Newman University. My research focuses on the post-secondary transition planning for students with high-incidence disabilities. In December of 2015, President Obama signed the Every Student Succeeds Act, which was a reauthorization of the Elementary and Secondary Schools Act. And it had an enhanced focus on creating educational opportunities focused on college and career readiness for all students. With that, a higher set of academic standards were created, which will ultimately lead to graduates who are better prepared for success in college and the workforce. So just to review a little bit of the literature related to this population, post-secondary transition planning is a part of IDEA, and it is a coordinated set of activities that focus on improving the academic and functional achievement of children with disabilities in terms of how they're going to function after high school, whether it's vocationally, educationally, or just actual participation in the community. And these coordinated set of activities and goals should be included in, or they will be included in their IEP, or individualized education plan, by the time they turn 16, but can be included earlier. High incidence disability, you might ask what it is. High incidence disabilities are those disabilities that have a higher incidence in the general population. So those include, for the purposes of this study, include students with learning disabilities and emotional and behavioral disorders, and students identified with other health impairments such as ADHD, ADD, and things like that. This actual population, the student population, has disparate outcomes when it comes to life after high school. They may be successful in high school or appear to be successful, but after high school, their opportunities dwindle in comparison to their typical peers. They have a higher dropout rate. Subsequently, they also are less likely to enroll in post-secondary educational opportunities, either collegiate or vocational trainings such as tech schools. And they also have fewer employment opportunities as a result. So if you don't graduate high school with the skills ready to join the workforce, like vocational skills such as showing up on time, being prepared, then you're less likely to hold down a job more effectively. So assess to address. So in order to figure out what these kids need, students need, you need to assess their transition skills in 5 different areas, such as vocational skills, career interests, self-determination, independence, and then college readiness. And this can be done through a variety of ways. The transition planning process is an ongoing process. Kids are always changing their minds as to what they want to be when they grow up. One day they could want to, they could be a future doctor. One day they could want to join the military, and then the next day they want to be working with a vet. It changes all the time. So transition assessment planning is an ongoing process that needs to be a continual conversation with your students and their families. And additionally, their families may have different ideas as to what they want their students to do after high school. So my research question focuses on what I can do as a practitioner to make my students have a successful transition out of the high school setting. And it is, what specific assessments and activities can teachers employ to ensure their students have a successful transition from high school to the post-secondary training of their choice, be it college, vocational training, or direct entry into the workforce. For the method of my research, I will be focusing on these 5 areas. The first one being the researcher as an instrument. So I am going to immerse myself in the data. I am a researcher. I am going to be a part of the data, and in order to reduce researcher bias, I'm going to utilize structural corroboration by getting data from a variety of sources, myself, other teachers, business owners, and coordinators of disability services across the state. That will also increase transferability to other populations. So instead of just focusing on my student population, I'm going to utilize the students of other teachers as well. I will also be creating an audit trail, and I will keep track of all of the data that I collect, everyone I talk to, timelines, budgets, everything like that. So it's very apparent what I've been doing and who I've been talking to in order to get the data for my study. Participants. I will be using a variety of participants, including recent high school graduates, those that have graduated between the years of 2013 and 2016, because these are the students that I've worked with. I have been in the schools longer than that, but the students that I know and still keep in contact with have graduated between those years. We'll also be in contact with their parents and guardians and caregivers, as well as their teachers or former teachers. And I will be talking with coordinators of disability services at local universities, tech schools, and colleges to see what kind of skills they look for in future students. Another big player in the employment of these students are business owners. So I'm going to survey some business owners in the local community to see what kind of skills they need their employees to have. Vocational skills are very important. You can't just not show up to work. So successful employment comes from knowing what the business owners want. So their voice is very important in this process as well. To select these participants, I used a critical case sampling method. I used a population that I already had access to, so it was easier, and it provided me with more practical information as to how to inform my future practices. To fulfill the consenting procedures, prior to contacting anyone, I will receive IRB approval from the Institutional Review Board at Carson-Newman. They will review my research proposal and tweak it if necessary before I am able to contact any of the potential participants. And prior to starting the study, I will also send a letter to those potential participants describing the purpose of the study and how I will use the data to inform my practices and ensure them that their information will be confidential. The data gathering procedures. Most of the data will be gathered via survey and interview. There will be open-ended questions and that ask things like, what was your favorite activity in high school that helped you prepare for life after high school? What type of things do you wish your teachers would have done with you in order to help you prepare for life after high school? Or for parents, I would say, what is one thing that you wish you would have known prior to leaving the enclosed four walls of the high school and sending your child off to college? What would you have liked to have known about their post-secondary options? Because most parents, come to find out, do not know what their options are after high school. I'll also be looking at transition assessments, what's available in the county, and I will be analyzing that in a variety of ways. I will also be looking at survey of the national outcomes. There has been a national longitudinal transition study completed that started in the 90s, and it's in its second wave now, and data is readily available online. So the experimental design and data analysis is next. I'm using a basic qualitative research design, that research study that looks at the opinions of the participants, and it gets an overall view of their perception of transition planning as they experienced it. As data comes in, I'm going to use open coding to kind of select the data that is relevant and kind of weed it out and categorize it, and then axial coding to even more fine-tune my categories. So I'll have big overall categories and then minor categories related to the data. So it'll just essentially put it all in place for me. And to evaluate all the assessments, I will be looking at the purpose, the cost, how it's used, whether or not it's used. It may be available, but if it's not used, what's the point? And then the strengths and the weaknesses of each. I will also be using the National Longitudinal Transitional Study data that's readily available to researchers online and compare it with the local outcomes of my students. So if my students have seen success in college, how does that compare with peers nationally? The last part is the limitations. The target population, my students, come from a certain subset of students in Middle Tennessee that are not representative of the national population. They are more affluent, and they come from backgrounds that where their parents are probably more educated than the national average. So I know that the socioeconomic status of my students is vastly different than the national average, and that's a limitation of my study because I'm pulling from a smaller pool of data. Additionally, the ethnic diversity of my student population, even the students across my county, are not as diverse as the national average. So there are limitations. However, I will get a good view of what I've been doing in the past 7 years in order to prepare my students for post-secondary training and opportunities, and it will lead to better practice amongst my colleagues and myself. And these are my references. Thank you for listening.